This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. And Jack, before you say anything or greet anybody, let me just say 2 things. 1, nice to see you. 2, I think that BWAA card should be pulled after that statement last week that Joe Joyce was more skilled than Zhang. Can't hear you. Go ahead.
The reason I'm a former president of the BWAA, because I lost our members a lot of money who'd be following my lead. They would be betting on some fights. But we told them betting's not allowed, but they snuck around. They had someone else do it for them. I'm only joking with that. But I was flat out wrong in the Zhang-Joyce fight. But I did say, Frank, that Joyce would take a beating for number rounds and he would outlast Zhang and stop him in the 9th to 10th round. That was my prediction. I was confident on the Joyce victory. On the first fight when he fought Zhang, he took everything that Zhang threw. Zhang busted Joyce up badly, but Joyce never left his feet. And had his eye not been so damaged, the fight would have continued. Who knows what would have happened had it continued. So I saw a similar path happening this fight, but maybe his eye not getting busted up and Zhang running out of gas. But with my dreadful prediction came a thought. Guys usually are never the same in rematches. I kind of knew it, but I discounted it. How often when a fighter suffers a very comprehensive defeat in the first fight, does he come back? Unless it's a flukish type thing where he just gets hit with an equilibrium punch, you know. But when a guy suffers a beatdown, they rarely come back.
Okay, you done? Okay. I said, after watching that first fight, and Joyce to me did not win 1 minute of it or any aspect other than he took great punches. Okay. Now, going into the rematch, Jack, I just didn't think Joyce could turn it around. And when I saw what was happening in the first round, I had no doubt. Did you ever see the movie with Bruce Lee, I think it was Enter the Dragon? Probably not.
Oh, yeah. I was a big Bruce Lee fan. Are you kidding? That Coliseum fight with Chuck Norris?
Okay. Do you remember the part where they're in the boat and they're going off to the island and the guy comes up and challenges him and says, "What's your style?" And Bruce Lee said, "I don't have a style." He goes, "Come on, everybody has a style." And Bruce Lee said, "My style is fighting without fighting." And the guy laughed. And then he put him in the boat and let the boat go. That's exactly what Joe Joyce did, Jack. He came out in the first round, tried to use his legs, move around, and he jabbed. But he did not jab with conviction. His jab said, "I'm throwing punches. I'm not awed by you, but I'm really not committing to the shots. But I'm at least going to put them in your face to give you something to think about so you don't walk at me like I'm handcuffed." Well, that only goes so far. And once Zhang saw that, and when he saw that Joyce was only willing to engage when he thought the table was set and everything was perfect, then he said, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to up the ante. I'm going to put pressure on him, and I'm going to start letting my hands go, and I'm going to give him some memories of that first fight. And that's exactly what he did. Nobody predicted, Jack, that it would end that emphatically. But when you looked at the disparity as far as their offense and their game and how they set it up, and one guy could get his punches in, his Sunday punches, the left cross, the right hook, in on demand, you kind of knew that Joyce was in for a long night. And again, when guys, once they get knocked out, it seems they're never the same after that, especially heavyweights.
Yeah, one punch sometimes changes everything. Even though the fight continues, we saw it happen with Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. People forget that Spence was doing well till a half minute left in the second round. Crawford had nothing on him till that point, but Crawford knocked Spence down. Something went out of Spence mentally. He felt inferior. It happened with Joyce in the second round. Zhang hits him a big punch and hurts him. And all of a sudden, all those memories of the first fight had to come back to Joyce. He immediately felt like he had maybe an extra big mountain to climb. So any little confidence he may have been building to that point, and I'm not saying he was gaining any confidence in such a short body of work in the second fight, it went out the window. And Zhang immediately took it to Joyce as soon as he heard him with that punch. And from then on in, the slaughter was on. You know what's
Jack, imagine you're Joe Joyce after the first fight, and now you get in there in the rematch, and you realize the guy just has a style that I can't solve, and now he's hitting you, he's asserting himself, and he's giving you more things to deal with and to think about. It was just an impossible situation for Joyce. I think it's one of those things, Jack, there might be some guys that maybe Joyce would do better against than Zhang, but when you match those two guys up, Zhang is going to win every time. And, you know, Jack, in all honesty, I don't know if we know how good Zhang is. Would I pick him to beat Usyk or Wilder or Fury? I don't think so. Maybe he just matches up with Zhang, but I know this much. He's in that conversation now, and he has to be in the mix for a title shot against the next guy who is up. And by the way, Brandon, no, we're going to go back to Monday nights, I think after the third Thursday night of October, like around the 23rd. This is temporary because I have some issues I have to take care of, personal issues on Monday night. It's the only reason why we moved it.
I thought, Frank, you wanted to coordinate it this to be a lead-in to Thursday night football. I'm a little confused. I thought you felt the Thursday night schedule stronger with the NFL than the Monday night.
I actually think that hurts us, Jack. And then we have Joe Bergman up there saying, good evening, gentlemen. There are 3 undefeated teams left in the NFL. Can you name them? Gee, Joe, I wonder who you're talking about. And Jack, earlier he's posting stuff about the Phillies already. Schwab hit a home run, and I got to read about that.
Okay, listen, kudos to the Eagles, the way they're doing, so far this point. But back to the Joyce fight with Zhang, I was flat out wrong completely. But I did think Zhang was going to have success early on and put a semi-beating on Joyce. I just thought it was a question. Joyce's motor would overtake Zhang, and Zhang would run out of gas. But now, this is
and Jack, that's where we disagree.
Why? Maybe I shouldn't assume that Zhang is ever going to fade out in a fight, even though he seemed to be tiring in the first Joyce fight. Maybe he doesn't tire late in a fight, and I couldn't say what would happen if he fought Usyk, Fury, or Wilder for sure. But let me ask you this: who's a harder puncher, Wilder or Zhang?
Wilder's right hand is bigger than any punch Zhang has, I believe.
Who's a more punishing puncher?
Zhang may be heavier handed and beat you up a little bit more, but Wilder has that more concussive shot where he can get you out with one shot.
But this is a concern about Zhang too. He's 40 years old. He doesn't fight like he's 40 years old. But the fact is, he's 40 years old. How much longer can he keep this going?
But Jack, how old is Wilder? Wilder's 38. Usyk's in his late 30s, and Fury's.
We don't know what Wilder has left, Frank. He hasn't proven anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Wilder's last 3 fights, the 2 fights that he lost against Fury, one was a total beatdown, and the other, if you forget the 2 knockdowns and Wilder's courageous stand, he was beaten up pretty badly in the 3rd fight too. Even though, he floored Fury and, had him in trouble there. And then against Robert Helenius, that 1-punch knockout in the 1st round, we could throw that out, basically.
Jack, you're right. We don't know what Wilder has, and we don't know what kind of stamina that Zhang has. And you know as well as I do, when most of your punches are landing, it doesn't take a lot out of you. It's when you miss. And I think where we disagreed on the fight was you thought perhaps that Joyce could weather the storm and get him to the later rounds, where I felt based on the last fight, he paid too much of a price and he couldn't get there. And I think that was the same in the rematch. Oh, he got caught with a better shot. But Jack, all the heavyweights today are old. I mean, really, other than Usyk, do we really know? I mean, Tyson Fury's a mystery too. And there's a guy that balloons up.
Well, just before we get off, we know where Zhang goes from here. He tries to get the biggest and best fights available. And hopefully something does open up for Zhang. Everyone wants to see Usyk and Fury. Fury's completely not dependable. We can't count on anything. And it's going to have to get to the point soon, Frank, where we're going to have to discount any claim that Fury has of being a world heavyweight champion. To me, Usyk's the heavyweight champion because Fury had announced his retirement. And I don't want to hear, well, it's only Tyson Fury. We know the way he is. He's a grown man. We should take what he said at face value. But in any event, it was appealing Fury and Usyk because it was supposed to give us the best heavyweight in the world. But now with Zhang in the equation, that might not necessarily be the case. We can't say so with complete certainty now.
Jack, when you were on that bandwagon, maybe a year ago, 6 months ago, about Fury, I gave you resistance. However, I am starting to align with you because this Fury is becoming a joke. Look, I understand he wants to make money. It's all about money. I understand that. But he's really making a mockery of the division, and something has to be done. He either after this fiasco that he's having next month with the MMA guy, if he doesn't fight either Usyk or Zhang, or I guess they would be the 2 guys in line, then he must be stripped. And the other thing that really
Josh won the UK, that would be a very acceptable fight.
Yeah, because Joshua hasn't lost since Usyk. Okay, but
and he's a big name.
And he's a big name and a big draw. It would be a big fight. People want to see them share a ring. But Jack, here's the thing that really frustrates me. And I was talking about this with a friend of mine who has an opinion I value. And that is, look, is this the golden era of the heavyweight division? Absolutely not. But you know what this era has? It has a bunch of guys, and we know the names, that if they would fight each other, there would be compelling fights. None of them are a give me, and it would stimulate the sport. I mean, look, Frank Sanchez and Jared Anderson, I want to see that. I mean, think of all the matchups. How about Wilder against Usyk or Zhang or Joshua? There are so many fights that can be made, and we'd pick a winner, but could we say with conviction who would win? And it's like these guys are just sitting around. It reminds me almost of the 80s, except the 80s guys did fight. They just were out of shape when they fought.
Let's talk about the fights that are happening. A heavyweight fight. Murat Gasayev, former cruiserweight champion of the world, going against Otto Wallin. And Otto Wallin's ID card is the good fight he gave Tyson Fury. And he hasn't built on that. Fury was cut so badly in that fight. from a punch that it looked like
Right.
the fight was going to get stopped. But people forget round 12 of that fight. Wallen was battering Fury in round 12. Fury was a tired fighter, just holding on till the final bell.
Hoping it wouldn't get stopped.
Wallen came close to actually pulling off an upset, even though the decision in Fury's favor was fair. And hasn't gotten a big fight since. And years have gone by. He's changed his management team. Now his biggest fight since Fury is taking place in Turkey, okay, against Gassiev. So he's going to get no favors from the judges over there. In other words, things are really stacked against Wallen. Hopefully he's getting paid a lot of money to basically go into the lion's den.
Jack, think about this. We just got done speaking about the two best heavyweights in the game, and I guess the consensus would be Fury and Usyk. Well, you just talked about Wallen. His one defeat is to Fury. That's his name. That's his calling card fight. Look at the other side. Gassiev. He has one loss. Who's that to? That was to Usyk in the final of the Ali tournament. And he's 5-0 since then. And it's like neither guy has really capitalized on it. But if you think about it, they've only been defeated by the consensus two best heavyweights in the world. So that makes the fight somewhat compelling. And Gassiev is up in weight now. I think he was 238 for his last fight. He's 6'3". He's a full-fledged heavyweight. So that's a real fight.
Yeah, you know what I would have liked to have seen? You mentioned Jared Anderson before. I can understand him and Frank Sanchez not fighting one another, even though in the past eras, young up-and-coming heavyweights would fight one another, like Rocky Marciano and Roland Lestars. Even in this era, Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois fought one another when they won beaten on the way up. So kudos to them for doing that. But I would like to see a Jared Anderson fight another Wallen. I mean, or Frank Sanchez instead of the Gassiev fight. And my logic is, if these guys can't beat another Wallen, they're not going all the way late on. So it gets to the point.
But Jack, they don't think that. If you're Jared Anderson and you look at Otto Wallen and you figure you can beat him, but you may not look good, and it's not a give me. And if you don't look good or you lose, then they think they're out of the money, and that is the problem with this sport. And as much as I want to blame Mayweather, there was a faction of that long before he was around. But we didn't see that in the 70s where we'd see contenders fight each other, and somewhat in the 80s. But I actually think that is somewhat a problem because it always comes down to risk versus reward. And that's what's stagnating the game, at least in all the weight classes, but maybe mostly in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, well, getting off the heavyweight division, the big talk right now is, in boxing is this weekend's fight, Canelo Alvarez against Jermell Charlo. And most eyes are going to be focused on Canelo Alvarez, even though this is a highly competitive fight. You can't discount Charlo's chances of pulling off an upset. But it seems it wasn't that long ago that Canelo was the consensus number one. I shouldn't say consensus, the number one pound for pound fighter in the eyes of a lot of people. I mean, it went back and forth for some years between Vasily Lomachenko and Crawford, but Canelo did hold that position for a time. And now, is there anything Canelo can do to get back in the mix to be number one pound for pound? Let's say he scored a sensational knockout over Charlo and he looked tremendous. Does that put him on the same level as Crawford is right now, or maybe even ahead of him?
Personally, to me, Jack, it wouldn't, because no matter what Canelo does to Jermell Charlo, I just think Crawford is clearly a better fighter and has proved it more overall his career. As far as if we look at Canelo, Jack, and we look at and examine his record, he officially has 2 losses. He could have 4 or 5, where Crawford's never had a close call. So I don't think there's anything he can do where he can jump Inoue or Crawford. But look, if he scored a sensational knockout over Charlo, I mean, that would get some people giving him some consideration for that. I never viewed him as the best pound for pound fighter in boxing, but he's been close a few times.
The pressure is going to be on Canelo after this fight, even if he wins decisively, because as good as Jermell Charlo is, this isn't the type of opponent that you beat and then take a soft fight after. For example, if Canelo was in, let's say, with David Benavidez, that would be a high-profile fight. It would be mouth-watering, and he beats Benavidez legitimately. Then he could take a soft fight after that, and people would be forgiving because he took the hardest possible fight before. Okay? I think you're allowed a breather more or less if you've had the hardest possible fight. But if you haven't and you're kind of picking your spots, as good as Charlo is, let's be honest, Canelo is picking his spots, because if people had a choice to see who they'd want him in with, it would be Benavidez over Charlo, without question. Without question.
Jack, that would be the fight. But let me ask you this. If you had to name, if you line Charlo up with all the opponents that Canelo has fought, I would make a case and feel confident saying Charlo at this stage ranks as one of the best opponents he will ever fight. After Mayweather, after Golovkin, and after Bivol, Charlo's right there on the pecking order as far as the good guys that Canelo has fought. And this is a Charlo in his prime at the right time. He didn't pick a spot as far as when he's fighting him. And again, a lot of people are looking at this jump from junior middleweight to super middleweight. Jack, every picture I've seen of Canelo and Charlo next to each other, if somebody would said to me, Frank, you tell me, which one of these guys is moving up in weight to fight the other? I'd look at that picture and I'd say, the guy with the red hair is moving up in weight to fight the other guy. So I think the size factor is clearly overstated. And I read something today by a buddy of yours who I have recently began to communicate with, Clifford Roll, and he had a great line.
Yeah.
He had a great line in his column today. He said, ask yourself this. If these two guys were fighting at junior middleweight, where Canelo kind of formed his legacy, who would you pick to win? And would you give Charlo a chance? And he said, and if you think it's a close fight, again, we can make a case that Charlo is better than any junior middleweight that Canelo fought. He goes, if you think it's a close fight, why would a couple pounds make a difference? And Charlo has the frame and the build where he can put on the weight, Jack. And he doesn't have to come in at 168. He can come in at 63, 64, still maintain his speed and maybe and pick up a little bit of power without slowing down. So I think the size factor is being overlooked. And what Clifford Roll said today, I think was a very good point. If they were fighting a junior middleweight, Canelo would not be the consensus pick.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I get the sense that this is Canelo's fight to lose. In other words, how much has he declined? I've been saying he's been declining the last couple of years, but has he been?
And he heard that, Jack. He said he's going to show everybody wrong, but he has heard that. He knows that thought is out there.
Right. But has he been gently declining? Okay. Sometimes a fighter can just gently decline and he can still perform well. He could still perform on the same level. And if Canelo has declined a lot, Charlo is more than capable of picking up the pieces and winning. Then there's the Las Vegas judges as well. No matter who, as neutral as judges try to be, they're aware of what's going on, the magnitude of Canelo. And if a round is very, very close, could go either way, there's a good chance they're going to lean towards Canelo unless they feel under pressure, not to go his way. I wrote a story called Judging Canelo. and I detailed his whole career, how all three judges scored his fights that went to decisions, whether they were valid or not. And this came out before his third fight with Golovkin, the story. And every judge, at least one judge, scored it wider for Canelo than they should have. At least one of the three judges in every single fight. The closest the judges came to scoring with fairly was the Danny Jacobs fight. I think you had a 115, 113, a couple of 116, 112, something like that. They were just fair in that fight. You know, they didn't one way or the other. And even the Bivol fight, all three judges had
I had 7-5. It wasn't 7-5.
Right, that was a 9-3 fight. So to make it up, the third Golovkin fight, they scored it like 7-5 Canelo when he won more or less like 9-3. Okay, so sometimes judges kind of make it up. They feel refreshed after a while. But something about Charlo, there's not that presence about him. I could see Charlo fighting the type of fight where he hits and moves, uses his legs.
And those are the guys that bother Canelo.
Right, like Austin Proud, Arizona, Lara, but that was
Lara, Bivol.
Yeah, well, Bivol had a physical presence where he backed Canelo up at times too.
He picked his spot.
I don't see Charlo sitting down on his punches and backing Canelo up.
Jack, all right, there's two things. When you talk about the scoring, and I said this in 2013, when Canelo fought Mayweather, and I forget the judge that had the fight a draw, which is 6-6. To me, Jack, that sent the message that Canelo was going to be the guy after Mayweather, because I don't think Canelo won one round. Maybe if I'm his father, I find a round to give him of the 12. But by one judge scoring that fight a draw and it not being a unanimous decision and it's only a majority decision, then Canelo can be promoted as a guy. Well, look, he fought Mayweather and one of the judges didn't think he got beat. And that said to me that they were willing to sacrifice a little bit of Mayweather because they know this guy is the next guy. And that's where the judging and the favoritism really started for Canelo.
Golovkin, the first Golovkin fight, 118, 112 for Canelo. Imagine that, 10 rounds to 2 for Canelo, and everyone.
But Jack, again, my point is that's 4 years after Mayweather, so the precedent was set. As far as what you said about Charlo, look, Charlo is longer, taller, more athletic. I think he has quicker feet. He has a good jab, and he's not throwing balloons. He has some pop on his jab, and if he uses the ring and picks up his feet, those are the guys that give Canelo trouble. The downside to that is I think Charles' mindset, and I could see Canelo dragging him into a toe-to-toe scrap, which, although Charlo can punch, he has a good chin, that favors Canelo, because I do think Canelo, without seeing him in the ring, I do think he is the stronger, more stout guy.
Canelo is going to be carrying the fight to Charlo. But Canelo has faded a bit in the later rounds of certain fights. Keep that in mind. Even the third Golovkin fight, Golovkin had nothing that fight, yet Canelo kind of faded towards the end. It's hard to explain. Even he admitted.
Jack, Canelo does take breath. That's another thing. And I had that in my notes. Canelo, throughout his whole career, he does take breathers during fights. And we have seen Charlo land some big shots later in the fight to either score the stoppage or turn the complexity of the fight. So I think that is something to look out for. And the other thing is Charlo can punch a little bit. How many guys has Canelo fought who we would say is a harder puncher than Charlo? There's been a couple, but I don't think that many. So I think if Charlo says, I'm going to box, I'm not going to get drawn into a fight, I think he has a chance. And then it comes down to, Canelo having to get him. But there will be a window for Charlo, I think, a little bit later in the fight because, as you said, he has faded and he does take breathers during fights.
See, I look at it a little differently. I think the window is wide open from in the beginning of the fight.
For who?
And for Charlo.
I agree with that.
I feel Charlo can outbox Canelo early. I think it's going to be a very close fight for 8 rounds. I could see like 4 rounds apiece going into the 9th round, the fight really hanging in the balance, both having success. And something tells me Canelo breaks through late in the fight, knocks Charlo down, gets him off his rhythm, and comes on late in the fight, wins a decision that won't be controversial, hard fought. But I could see the fight kind of getting away from Charlo a little late. I'm going with Canelo on points.
That's my pick also, Jack. I'm going to go with Canelo on points. I agree. I think the first couple rounds, there's a window for Charlo. And I think later in the fight, Charlo is not as good defensively as Canelo. I think Canelo can force him to use more energy than he wants to without being without expending much himself and without getting anything for it. And I think the other thing that is somewhat being overlooked, and this matters, Canelo has been on this stage many times. This is the first time for Charlo really, really being in a big spot where our people around the world are going to be watching this fight and that he's part of the show. And I think that makes a big difference. Guys talk about that's not a big factor, but to anybody that's been in that situation and been around guys who have been in that situation, that atmosphere and all that pressure does make a difference. So that's something else that leans towards Canelo. But I agree, Jack. We're going to agree on this one. I think that Canelo wins a decision. Wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than people think. I don't think he'll score the stoppage, but if he does, that's a cherry on top because that'll say a lot, stopping Canelo. And I also say that when they get in the ring, the Canelo will not look like the predominantly bigger guy.
I want to say this, even though I highly doubt it's going to happen. If one punch should turn the fight around, I think Charlo's the bigger one-punch hitter. And despite Canelo's great chin, he's getting on in his career. Maybe that chin could get dented by a big shot by Charlo, who's a very big puncher. Canelo himself isn't that much of a one-punch fighter. We know that he knocked Kovalev out against the ropes with one punch. But he doesn't hit that hard with one punch. I mean, he hits you one.
No, he's not a life taker.
Right. But Charlo is more dangerous for just one shot. But Canelo's got that great chin. And unless Canelo's chin all of a sudden lets him down, he'll take the best of what Charlo's going to throw.
And plus, you have to count on Canelo's probably going to be working Charlo's body. And that may take something out of him. People laugh when the fight was made, Jack, but I actually think it's a compelling fight. Yes, I'm going to get it. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And to me, it's not an automatic or a gimme. Some of these fights are an automatic. You know who's going to win. Even though Charlo is about a 3-1 underdog, I think he's going to be in the fight. And again, I look at it this way. He is one of the best opponents that Canelo has ever fought. And I don't think the weight's going to be much of a factor. And I think Charlo is closer to his prime than Canelo. And if Canelo wins, he better fight either Benavidez or Bivol next.
Whoa. Don't assume David Benavidez, if he does fight Demetrius Andrade, is that fight set, Frank?
Yes, I think it is.
They're going to fight, but I haven't heard the exact details. Okay? And I mean, what is the date of that fight?
Jack, you talk, and I'm going to look it up as we're talking.
Right. I don't think they've set a date on it exactly. Don't discount Demetrius Andrade. If Demetrius Andrade shows up at the top of his game, age is 35, has been inactive, if that hasn't affected him, he beats David Benavidez if he shows up at the top of his game.
It's
Frank,
not listed. It's not listed yet. It's not listed.
But if Benavidez beats Andrade or vice versa, how does Canelo avoid, fighting one of the two? I don't want him in with the brother Jamal Charlo next. Jamal Charlo hasn't fought in over 2 years. I
don't think Canelo would fight Andrade, Jack.
If he wants to go in and have a rematch against Bivol Canelo, that's his right. I mean, I'm not going to condemn him because that would be a tough test to try to reverse the defeat. I'd have a lot of admiration for him if he actually tried that, but he shouldn't feel obligated to. He lost to a bigger guy, lost a decision. For Canelo, it's best probably to move on.
It probably is. And Jack, let me just say this. When Benavidez beats Andrade, if they fight, Canelo will have to fight Benavidez. And if Andrade wins, I'll predict Canelo won't go near him because of his style, and he'll say there's no money, and he'll find somebody else like a Jamal Charlo to fight down the road. But there is talk of...
You got to defend Canelo this way, not by not fighting Benavidez. And I know it sounds like a contradiction. Benavidez had his opportunity to make a big statement when he fought Caleb Plant, who Canelo stopped in 11 rounds. And even though he clearly deserved the decision, Benavidez, he didn't look sensational. He didn't make a statement. All he did was get the W, a clear W he got. He didn't put the pressure on Canelo that he could have.
If he would have devastated him, there would have been more pressure. I agree. But I do think Benavidez beat Caleb Plant soundly enough that I don't really think that's a factor. But I will say this. I get the feeling that for some reason, I don't know what it is, and I don't want to say he's fearful, but I do get the feeling that he doesn't want to fight Benavidez. And I'm not sure we see that fight, Jack. We might see Jamal if Canelo beats Jermell, although there is talk that Caleb Plant is going to fight Jamal Charlo next.
I have very little interest in that fight. Caleb Plant, good solid fighter, not a world-class fighter. And if he does beat Jamal Charlo, it means Charlo basically has lost control of his career. He hasn't been training, and he's basically lost complete focus. Because Jamal Charlo at his best beats Caleb Plant. There's very little doubt about that.
Well, I think a little bit more of Caleb Plant than you. I don't know who I would take if he fought Jamal, but I know this much. He's fought two of the elite guys in Benavidez and Canelo. He didn't embarrass himself against Canelo.
No.
Benavidez, he just hung on. He really never was a threat to win the fight. So, but at least he went the distance. That says something. And he went the distance trying, except for the last round. But I have interest in seeing that because, once again, Jack, are they great? No, but they're two of the best guys at the weight, and that's what we need more of. And by the way, speaking of that, we have a couple other things to touch on. But today, Terrence Crawford turns 36 years old. Did you know that?
Oh, Frank, I thought we were going to make a big announcement. We do things without fanfare, you and I. Isn't this our 100th show?
It is that also, I believe, according to my calculation.
Under the radar.
Yes. Canelo sold his soul to Al Heyman. That's Craig Wright. Al won't feed him cans. Caleb Plant is world class. I kind of agree with you there, Craig.
Caleb Plant is very world class. Come on. I mean, Caleb Plant is not. It depends what you want to define as world class. He didn't come close to beating Canelo. He didn't come close to beating Benavidez. If he came a little short, came close to beating those guys, the outcome was in doubt. It went down to the wire. Okay. I'll give Caleb Plant a compliment. He's a contender more than he is a gatekeeper. How about that? And let's leave it at that. I'm willing to call him a contender as opposed to a gatekeeper. But in reality, if a big name opponent came up and fought him, he would be looked at as a gatekeeper. Let's say hypothetically Jaime Munguia went in against Caleb Plant. We would compare Munguia's performance against Canelo's and Benavides, when they fought Plant. And that's what a gatekeeper is. He draws the comparisons.
Jack, would you agree that Caleb Plant is one of the 5 best super middleweights in boxing?
I don't know. I have to look at the names. I mean,
okay. Well, I think he is. And if I have somebody in the top 5, I have to say they're world class because that's the track that they play on. And Caleb Plant has only been outrun by the two of the best guys in the division, and he still went rounds and won a few rounds with those guys. So I think he's world class.
He's a good fighter, just not an elite.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jack, what else you have?
Well, Colonel Bob Sheridan passed away. I mean, well-known broadcaster, called a lot.
Don King's broadcaster.
Yeah, Don King's broadcaster, basically. And he was a character, and I mean this in a good way, okay? In a good way. He had that distinct voice, and I never met him. So I didn't
Either
know
did I.
Man. And normally, I've met just about every big name in the business. When I say met him, I don't mean, it may have been hello and goodbye, a quick word, and that would be it. Doesn't mean they're buddies. I knew him in any way. But Colonel Bob Sheridan, we never really quite bumped into one another to exchange any words. But the voice was very distinct. He called a good fight. I never heard the words him being any type of shill or anything like that. I think he called it like he saw it, and he'll be missed.
When I think of Bob Sheridan, I think of him interviewing Muhammad Ali at the Ken Norton-George Foreman fight, and him giving Ali the business, how Norton could go 24 rounds with Ali in 2 fights, but yet he couldn't last 5 minutes with Foreman. And I think he asked Ali some good questions, and he put him on the spot. However, again, I never met him. I understand he's a very decent guy. Jack, I did not enjoy his commentary because to me, he was the antithesis of Don Dunphy. To me, Don Dunphy is the gold standard. He spoke when there was something to say. He assumed that the audience had a clue to which they were watching, and I love that about him. Where to me, Jack, if you go back and you look at Bob Sheridan's work, he talks for 2 minutes and 55 seconds of every round. And to me, it just grated on me, and I didn't like it. I'm not saying he was bad. I just wasn't crazy of that I have to talk for 3 minutes of every round style.
Yeah, we all have our preferences. Back in the day, the 2 premier announcers calling fights were Don Dunphy and Howard Cosell. And most people said, oh, they prefer Don Dunphy. They can't stand Cosell. They kind of made it personal. I always enjoyed Howard Cosell calling a fight a little more than Don Dunphy. Was he more knowledgeable than Don Dunphy? Probably not. But there was something about Cosell having a flair for the dramatic, okay? And Dunphy was more factual. Dunphy was
more meat and potatoes.
Dunphy was more like reading the New York Times. Okay, you're not going to get any of the sensational, entertaining stuff in it, but you'll get the hardcore news. Cosell was more, about a little more.
New York Post.
There. Like, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier. Dunphy would say maybe once, down goes Frazier. And, but he wouldn't go, there wouldn't be a second down goes Frazier. There wouldn't be a follow-up to it. And Cosell, I always liked, Cosell was actually a favorite of mine. Of course, he turned on boxing late on, but I remember all the fights Cosell called. He wouldn't be as factual as Dunphy. Dunphy, would be doing his homework, getting every little detail down there. And Cosell would be more, to hit the high note than Dunphy.
Jack, let me ask you this, though. Okay. What, to me, the thing that stood out about Cosell was when Cosell did an event, whether he was at the Billie Jean King Bobby Riggs tennis match, the Olympics, Monday Night Football, Monday Night Baseball, or a Saturday afternoon fight, the fact that Cosell was there made me think, as a kid growing up, this is where it's going on. This is the place to be. This is what's happening. So I think he added that pageantry to it. However, let me ask you this. Now, you said you liked listening to Cosell better than Dunphy. Let's drill down on that. Are you talking more about doing a fight of Muhammad Ali, or what if Emil Griffith is fighting Joey Archer or Dick Tiger? Do you still want to hear Cosell over Dunphy on a fight like that, or is it just an Ali fight?
For entertainment, if it's on the radio, I'd rather have Don Dunphy. How's that? If it's a radio broadcast, because Dunphy would inform us exactly what was going on. Dunphy came under criticism for how he called the first fight between Emil Griffith and Nino Benvenuti. Benvenuti came as a virtual unknown to the United States, scored a big upset, won the middleweight title over Griffith by decision. And I think Dunphy's bosses wanted him to be a little more entertaining, make it more exciting. And Dunphy's answer, I remember in the paper saying, I won't fake a fight call. Okay, if it's a boring fight in his view, no matter how big an upset, he's not going to fake it. Cosell would fake it. Cosell would
absolutely.
Take a boring fight and try to make it into something big. At the end of the day, boxing is an entertainment business, not just in the ring, but out of the ring. Case in point, there were a lot of better fighters than Arturo Gatti. Let's compare. I just mentioned Emil Griffith. Who would you rather see, Emil Griffith or Arturo Gatti fight? Emil Griffith, one of my boyhood idols, but I'd rather see an Arturo Gatti fight. He's going to give you more thrills and spills than Emil would. Emil, you'll see greatness in the ring when he's there, and the other guy you'll see excitement with. And something about the excitement that Cosell, brought, but after the two of them, we had a number of other announcers. You had Jim Lampley, who I liked an awful lot, but he could be a bit of a shill for HBO. And I didn't.
And he was a homer.
Once he went over a pound for
I would say
list, and they were all HBO signed guys.
Yep. Jack, that's just like when PBC would put up the top welterweights and never mention Crawford back back 4 or 5 years ago. Remember that? They put the top welterweights in there, and they were all the PBC guys, and they'd never mention Crawford. I would think today.
I just want to clear something up. I didn't mean HBO signed guys. They weren't signed with HBO, but they fought on HBO.
Right.
And Lampley was a very loyal company man. Okay? And Cosell's influence, I'm sorry I cut in before, but Cosell's influence could be seen in how important it was to be dramatic. Jim Lampley came under a lot of criticism because he wasn't dramatic enough when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. People would say, oh, what a lousy call of that final knockout. So when Foreman knocked out Michael Moorer, he had the great line, it happened. It happened,
yeah. I enjoyed Lampley. He's not my favorite, but I enjoyed him. He was good. I think today the best is probably Al Bernstein. And the guy I just can't. This guy does football too, but Joe Tessitore is not my favorite. Too much over the top.
Well, I like Joe Tessitore. A certain part of the job is if you're working for ESPN, you want to build the guys up, but within reason. Within reason, I don't think Tessitore goes overboard with being overly dramatic on
I
stuff.
think he does everything he says, Jack, including football, not just boxing.
Well, you want to build a product up, too.
I understand that.
I mean, he's got Timmy Bradley there who tries to take his game to another level and unfortunately gets his
You know what,
feet
Jack?
tied up.
I'm glad you brought Bradley up because I have been a staunch critic of Bradley. But I will say this. Since they removed Andre Ward, I think Bradley has become a little more tolerable because I don't think he feels threatened that he has to say something more profound than Andre Ward did. And I do think he's dialed it back a little bit. And I think he's a little bit better a little easier to listen to. I still hate all the names he comes up with and all the gadget names. But I do think since Andre Ward has left, I think Bradley is a little bit more tolerable. And look, he knows what he's talking about. I just think that he goes over the top too much to try to let you know he's the smartest guy in the room. And when it comes to that, Jack, the guy I really like, and I think he breaks down fights and sees things better than any other analyst on boxing. And you're going to laugh at this. I think Malignaggi is terrific.
Oh, yeah. Paulie Malignaggi is. Paulie Malignaggi has great
If I could talk boxing with any one of the high-profile guys, I would enjoy sitting down at the corner bar over a cheesesteak and a couple of drinks talking boxing with Paulie Malignaggi over all of them.
Right, Paulie Malignaggi.
Whether it's history or today's fighters.
Yeah, no. Paulie is very concise, very clear. He doesn't sugarcoat things. I remember what he said about Adrian after he fought Adrian Broner. He was an analyst for Broner's other fights afterwards. And Broner turned in a so-so performance. I forgot what fight it was. And Broner was comparing, himself to Floyd Mayweather. And Malignaggi, said at that time, that era, there was only one Floyd Mayweather around at that time. He said, look, Broner's a very good fighter. He says there's nothing wrong with being a very good fighter. You could be happy about that. You don't have to make yourself out to be something more than you are. Like, he has those type of insights. By the way, Al Bernstein was a blow-by-blow guy, but for years he's basically been an analyst. So it depends whether.
I think he handled both well.
Yeah, he was pretty good. It also depends the chemistry, the team that you're with. Now, I absolutely love Teddy Atlas to hear him. He's a knowledgeable guy, great insights, but I wouldn't want to work with Teddy, not on a personal level, because he's a terrific guy from, my dealings with him personally. But Teddy is like a player, always has to have the ball in his hands, okay? And he's kind of like Wilt Chamberlain. His skills might be too overpowering for the team concept, like to defer to someone else on the broadcast. So it kind of makes it a little hard if you're working with him in that sense. Right.
But Jack, you know what? Here's it. And look, I like Teddy's breakdowns. Yeah. I like that he's candid. But here's what I don't like about Teddy. And some people may think I'm grasping at straws, but Jack, what I don't like is every time a fighter gets beat, Teddy questions their character and heart. And I don't like that. I don't think that applies. I mean, he said and has said multiple times that George Foreman quit against Muhammad Ali. And I want to know, where do you get that? Where do you get that he quit? He was gassed and he had nothing left and he got beat by the better guy that night. I don't know anybody that saw that fight that thinks Foreman quit.
The funny thing about it, before Teddy even started working for ESPN, I was on the phone with him and somehow the conversation came to Foreman. And I remember him telling me that so many years ago. He really felt Foreman caved in mentally. Keep in mind, Teddy's mentor was Customato. That was Customato's philosophy. That fight, the mental part about it, he stressed more strongly than any other person in boxing, before. He was really into that. So Teddy kind of looked at Foreman slowing down, and I guess he felt Foreman submitted in that fight. Like he gave
I
up.
disagree.
I disagree too, but it's how Teddy feels in that fight.
And Jack, think about this. He comes from the Customato school. And who's Customato's most famous student? Mike Tyson. What was Mike Tyson's biggest flaw? Didn't handle resistance real good.
Well, had the motto continued to be around, had Atlas continued to train Tyson after the amateurs, who knows what Tyson's intestinal fortitude would have been. Customato was a brilliant mind. He coined the phrase the determined quitter. And he gave Jerry Quarry as an example of a determined quitter. A guy's going to hang in there and take a beating. He's never going to surrender and say, I don't want to fight anymore. But he's basically given up on winning the fight. That's what he meant by a determined quitter. And there are so many guys like that. They're determined. I mean, the majority of guys are like determined quitters. I mean, think of it, right? I mean, they come to win. They give it all they have for a few rounds. And then they come to the conclusion, I can't beat this guy, but I'm going to hang in there and do the best I can. But in reality, they're surviving more than they're trying to win.
Well, I don't know if I understand the statement, Jack. I don't know if I would think I look at Jerry Quarry as a quitter. You know what?
I don't know. I hate to use the word quitter because that sounds bad. Let's be honest about it, Frank. Let's talk about Jerry Quarry. The second fight against Ali, he basically gave up at a certain point, and they stopped the fight. He did give up, even though he didn't wave. He didn't want, and
Jack, Ali beat the snot out of him. He had nothing left.
He had, but listen.
I mean, he was still on his feet and breathing, but that's about it.
Ali completely befuddled him, but Quarry basically shut down. A guy like a Joe Frazier, Ali could have pounded on him and outclassed Smoking Joe for 6-7 rounds. Outclassed him, I mean, completely. And Joe would still think he could win the fight and would keep taking it to Ali no matter
Jack,
what.
Ali never beat up Joe Frazier as much as he beat up Jerry Quarry.
Had he, Frank.
I'm not going to go down that hypothetical road.
Never would have caved in.
Not going to go down that. I know Frazier wouldn't cave in, but I don't see Quarry a quitter. And Jack, you know what? Sometimes the other guy is just better.
A determined quitter.
I don't like that. I don't like that. And there's a guy talk about a determined quitter. That's the same guy that wouldn't let Floyd Patterson fight all the elite guys of the 60s to keep him and kept him away from Liston. What was that? A smart manager?
He knew what Liston would do to him. He knew Liston would obliterate Patterson. That's why
he didn't let him fight Cleveland Williams. Didn't let him fight Terrell. Kept all those guys away from Floyd.
Williams and Terrell weren't on Patterson's radar. Was Eddie Machin and Zora Foley.
Jack, Williams fought Liston in 58 and 59. Patterson was the champion then. They tried to make those fights. Even after Liston killed him, Patterson would go near him.
Top contenders, Zora Foley and Eddie Machin were higher ranked contenders in Cleveland.
They're two of the guys he kept him away.
Yeah, correct. Listen, I agree. He picked this.
So that's where Teddy gets that mindset. I just see it differently, and I think they call too many guys quitters. That's me.
No, I hate the term, but it's determined quitter. Fighters do surrender during a fight a lot more than we want to admit. They won't retire in the corner, say they don't want to go on. We'll resume this next week, Frank, because it's a good topic.
All right, Jack. Everybody, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next week. Jack and I both have Canelo to win, and by decision. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.